Good evening and welcome to CBC Presents. I'm your host, Wendy Burke, and this evening we will be looking at the DLP's presidential race and election readiness. To help me examine this topic this evening, I have a four-member panel. The members of that panel are Mr. Hartley Henry, who's a regional political strategist who's brought home many an election win for several Caribbean political parties. We also have Dr. George Bell, a veteran political scientist and the former dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences at the Cave Hill campus of the UWI. Also with us are Dr. Maureen Holder, a political and social commentator, and last but not least, Mr. Peter Wickham, joining us from France, who is a political consultant and the director of CADRES, the Caribbean Development Research Services. Okay, I want to welcome all of our panelists this evening, and we are discussing the DLP's presidential race. That election gets underway tomorrow and on Saturday. Let's start first of all with the race and the two contenders. We have the incumbent president in Ms. Verla de Pisa, and we also have a new challenger in Mr. Guy Hewitt. If we can examine what these two people both bring to the table, a quick comment from each of our panelists. Hartley, you can start the ball rolling.
Thank you very much, and a very good evening to viewers and to yourself, Maureen. I would want to start first by suggesting that this is a very unfortunate period that we have reached, in that Sunday's election, from a strategic point of view, really had no right to be. In our political culture, once an interim government has passed 3 years, you begin to consider its open season. It's what we call the silly season. And this event that we are having on Sunday, to my mind, is poorly timed, and it is also very poorly directed, because it is not about electing, and I want to stress, it is not about electing a leader of the Democratic Labour Party. The constitution of the Democratic Labour Party is very clear. The political leader of the Democratic Labour Party is chosen from the elected leader of the parliamentary team, the parliamentary party. And therefore, I am a bit more concerned about who are not present in the race on Sunday, this weekend, than I am with whom. And I'll explain that to you what I mean. When you look at some of the prospective candidates, especially the experienced candidates, who are likely to be returning and offering themselves, I find it very strange that they have opted not to go for presidency at this stage, but are keeping their powders dry. Because something tells me that this weekend is a preliminary run to the ultimate derby, which will take place on the night of the next election, when a few of them, to my anticipation and prediction, could very well find themselves elected. And then is when you will have a serious election of a leader of the Democratic Labour Party, an opposition leader, a parliamentary leader, or what have you. So I wish to make the point first that I really do not associate what is happening in George Street on Sunday with any aspect of political strategy or political tactic that is designed to assist the party. I think what will happen on Sunday will harm the party, because it will reflect a disunited party that is not ready for governance, that cannot be taken seriously as a government in waiting, and therefore it will put the party, to my mind, in a weaker position come next Monday morning than it is right now. And later I will get into the personalities, but I just want to make it clear that I don't see this weekend's activity as electing any future leader of a parliamentary Democratic Labour Party.
Okay, with that out of the way, we'll move on to Dr. Bell. How do you see the presidential race and the two candidates?
Mr. Analysis there is sound political logic. I normally not expect that after in a first term, at the end of a first term, when prospects of victory at the polls are less badly, one would not expect that there would be a weak performance in the general election. Behave as if, and I can't say that this is coming from both candidates, but to behave in particular from one candidate as if there is an issue of a national vote for a national leader, to project themselves in that way and then to parachute into the electoral process of the party is bad. That is, it is not consistent with consolidating the recovery of the party, with the rebuilding of the party, and it is undermining the effort on that responsibility. And the person who took on that responsibility was Mr. Because she didn't have to go forward, is that nobody else went forward in relation to the task of reconstructing the party. We had some question marks about her capacity to do that, but she started to show some signs of effectiveness last year by defeating Mr. Pilgrim. We can elaborate on that later. And secondly, in being able to announce now a number of seats, says that she has performed where some people were questioning whether she could deliver. And I think that to that extent, to actually bring yourself to parachuting on her effort at this time is to undermine the consolidation.
For her perspective on what's going to be happening at George Street over the weekend.
Hi, thanks, Wendy. Let me just look at Mr. Hewitt because I can't judge Mr. Hewitt's personality in terms of saying what he can bring or cannot bring. The only thing I could do is analyze his very public campaign. And I saw some things that you would not normally expect for an internal administrative party election. Things like speaking nationally, challenging the government on macroeconomic and social issues, addressing some private organizations. Now, the addressing the private organizations, I had wondered if that was about fundraising or if it was about attracting new membership to the Democratic Labour Party. And I was not sure, but all I saw was that it was not the most sagacious way for Mr. Hewitt to do things. So it made me wonder if Mr. Hewitt had sufficient time to develop an understanding of the internal political subculture of his party. It's an internal election. All right, he has his right to challenge for the I believe that it was always going to be an uphill task to prove that Verla de Pisa is unfit to take the party into the general election, given that Mr. Hewitt himself has nothing in his portfolio by which to compare what she has done already. So, in other words, Ms. De Pisa has demonstrated that she can organize. She has demonstrated that she can work across constituencies. She has demonstrated that she has what it takes to keep the thing together, whether or not we want to question her leadership style. So, what does Mr. Hewitt bring that can be compared to, that I can say he's a better leader if the argument is Burla is not? So these issues come to mind, and internal elections is a normal process in any political party. The BLP will have to go through it at some point at the general conference. If there's no challenger, that's fine. If there's a challenger, it will be a bigger issue. But right now, I thought that the issue gained too much public attention, largely because of the very public campaign that Mr. Hewitt carried out.
Okay, if we can have Peter now before we get a bit more in depth about this whole public campaigning and whether or not it is still an internal process for the DLP. And as Mr. Henry would have said, whether or not it's basically not just an exercise in futility at this point. Peter, can we hear from you?
Yeah, thanks for including me on the panel. I agree with a lot of the points that have been made by others, so I'm not going to repeat. Just to say that there's a lot of things that are odd about this campaign. Generally speaking, when people come forward and attempt to secure leadership, there's a process that usually requires that they demonstrate grassroots work. They usually solidify themselves in a constituency, and then after that, they move forward to try and take the leadership. This is the first time that I'm familiar with where in the region we've seen a leader parachute in from the United Kingdom and essentially assume a position which is a competitive position in relation to the leadership of a particular political party in the region. Certainly, Hartley would remember the campaign of Kenny Anthony, who is in many ways compared. I mean, I would say he was the most successful person that came in from outside and secured the leadership and then went on to win an election in a landslide. The thing is that we have to remember that Kenny Anthony had a base in politics before he left and went to UWI and CARICOM and so on. So in a sense, he's not comparable with Guy Hewitt. So really, it's novel. I mean, strange things happen in politics, and if he prevails on the weekend, I think that this will be another one that we will have to add to the history books of a person who, like Donald Trump, is unknown to political life, who can parachute in, take control of the leadership, and then move on. So there's an oddity about it that I find interesting, and it is curious, that a person who has been a member of the Democratic Labour Party for 3 years can generate this much interest at this point in time. It says to me that there's probably something more to this, and that's the part that I'm struggling with. I'm trying to understand what more there is to it in relation to the whole bid and the extent to which this bid has attracted so much attention. Because for certainly, one would not have thought that at this stage that the challenge to the Barbados Labour Party would have been coming in this way. The DLP still has a lot of work to do to get itself together and prepare itself for the next election campaign. And yeah, it definitely needs help. A person with Hewitt's talent and certainly access to resources, could have been extremely useful in helping to prepare the Democratic Labour Party going forward. So I will stop at that point for now and say that for me, it's been an odd election bid. And it is certainly one that if it is successful, we will have to say, yeah, this is definitely one that we have to add to the history books, because I don't know that this has been done before in the region.
Okay, when we return to CBC's program this evening, the special edition of CBC Presents, we will continue to look at the presidential race for the DLP and how ready they are for the next general election. And we're back. Before we went off, we had some opening statements from our four panelists with reference to the runoff between Verla de Pisa and the Reverend Guy Hewitt. Now, Hartley, you made some interesting comments coming in, basically saying that it should not be taking place at this time. But it is the party's time to have its annual conference. And while Reverend Hewitt may not have been one of the individuals that we would have seen over the time that Mr. Pisa has been helping to try to bring the party back together and create some glue within the old guard and the new. We have now seen this person, as we say, parachuting in. What do you think is driving him or could be driving him? And what do you think that it had to become so public as opposed to trying to work within the machinery of the party to get the internal support first?
Well, my reading of this is that this is a resumption of, it would now have to be about 7 years ago, the Eager 11. That episode, now infamously known as the Eager 11, where you have efforts to address the issue of post David Thompson leadership of the Democratic Labour Party. I think you have a few former MPs who still do not accept their political mortality, who still wish to appear relevant around the Democratic Labour Party, and who have decided that their presence will be felt by finding someone who they can throw in to a position such as this. I made the point earlier that I do not see this as resolving any issue, because if it is understood, the constitution of the party is understood clearly. The silence, if you watch the St. George North by-election, and you saw a very lackluster appearance and lackluster presence of some key figures. And if we get down to brass tacks now, for want of a better term, you're speaking about Richard Seeley. You're speaking about Dr. David Eswick. You're speaking about Mr. Michael Lashley. To a lesser extent, Stephen Lashley, who I believe has been outfoxed in terms of the naming of another candidate for St. John. The absence of those three personalities I just mentioned, Mr. Chris Sinclair has not been visually active in politics since the last election. So therefore, I think he's signaled his intention to end. But those three individuals, the absence of those three individuals from this race on the weekend, tell me this is not the main event. This is a preliminary act. This is an administrative job that these two persons are looking for. They are looking for a position to help and assist in preparing the machinery to get the party into an election. I still believe the issue of the leadership of the Democratic Labour Party beyond the night of the next general election is going to be determined, is going to be fought for and determined on election night and not before. Because I do not see those three individuals in particular comfortably sitting and serving in any parliamentary team under either of the two persons who we have here. The other persons named on team so far as candidates are political unknowns. They are not relevant to the discussion, but certainly I do not see Guy Hewitt as being relevant beyond. If you cannot find a seat to call your own, if you cannot remember where you came from, where you grew up, where you pitched marbles, which choir you sang in, which cricket team you played for, which club you led. If you can't remember anything about where you came from as a young Barbadian growing up, and therefore you are moving around from constituency to constituency, knocking on doors, it tells me clearly that you are not serious about having any serious future in politics. And I just want to clarify one issue about this notion of being a political newcomer. Because I recall many years ago, when the National Democratic Party was formed, it had not only a senior arm, it also had a junior arm. And it would be very useful for persons to do some research to remind me tonight who was the head of the youth arm of the National Democratic Party. So I don't know where this notion that all of a sudden someone has had an epiphany on the way to somewhere and has now developed an interest in public life. This is crass opportunism that one is seeing. And I will pause there for now, because persons must remember that that some of us As a very good friend of mine would say, all who know you indeed. And I just want to make that point. As far as Verla de Pisa is concerned, I think it is unfortunate that having led the party for 3.5 years, and assuming up to 6 months ago that she was getting ready to lead the party into the election, that she now has to be distracted with this scenario, I think it is unfortunate. Not that I think it will alter the inevitable result, but I believe that it is unfortunate that the party now has to be distracted with this scenario. And it also speaks, I think, as well to the unfortunate loss of seniors in terms of statespersons in the party. You've had a party that has suffered not only an electoral defeat, but in the space of a decade, you would have lost a cadre of leaders who all provided that type of behind the scenes leadership and guidance. Warwick Franklin, Branford Tate, Sir Philip Graves, Lloyd Erskine Sandiford, Leroy Braffett. These are all persons who were there and who I'm sure would have intervened in this present debacle were they still active or alive. And it is unfortunate that there's no one around the party who could say to these two persons, cut it out. Because what's happening here now is political cannibalism of a nature we've never seen in Barbados politics before. And certainly for it to be happening within the 22-month countdown to a general election is super unfortunate.
Mr. Henry, before I go to Dr. Holder, you said it's unfortunate that no one is about to help them. But in your time working with the party as a strategist and working with the late David Thompson, there was a lot that you would have done for the party. But under the other leader, ideas didn't mesh and you would have departed from within. Do you think that you would now give advice to Mr. Pisa or any of the other old heads that you have mentioned about how to settle what you have termed the debacle?
Yes, if I could, I would give free advice. And I say free advice from the point of view that I personally think that the Democratic Labour Party today is placing way too much emphasis on the issue of leadership. This is not an era. This is COVID. This is a COVID 2021 we're living in. This is not an age or an era for titular leadership, whereby you are not going to find, we produce, countries such as Barbados and other islands in Eastern Caribbean produce one or two good leaders at a time in an era, in a decade. You have them coming, they come in spurts. Right now, there is no one you're going to produce who by themselves will be able to become the type of political colossal that the Prime Minister Mia Mottley has become in her short period of time. Therefore, my first advice to them would have been that there are other areas and other approaches you can take to becoming relevant and attractive in politics. For example, this is 3 years and we have not had the articulation of any revised or revamped philosophy, any policies that we can speak about. We do not know today where the Democratic Labour Party stand on issues that are of fundamental relevance and importance to the country. We do not know where they're going. There's no white paper, green paper, yellow paper, anything that has been set forth before us as an electorate to say this is the Democratic Labour Party of 2022-23. This is who we are. You have come with a team of candidates and you are throwing names out there that mean nothing to anyone. You've named 27, 28 candidates, I'm told. I cannot honestly repeat the name of 5 right now if you ask me to repeat the name of 5 of them. So you have not produced policies. You have not produced a team. You have not produced any anything philosophically or ideologically different to that which was rejected 3 years ago. But yet you're saying you are ready for an election. And you are pinning that on your attempt to come up with a personality, a single personality, who you feel can go up against the incumbent prime minister. I think that is a strategic error. I think that the party needs, to my mind, to hold forward to address all 4 issues and to be able to come to the people of Barbados with a COVID Barbados 2023, 22, 23 plan, the type of Barbados that will be created under a Democratic Labour Party administration and the fundamental changes that will be made. And so far, I've heard nothing of that. It's, to me, the whole leadership scenario is a distraction that I think is working in favor of the incumbent Barbados Labour Party.
All right, thank you so much, Hartley. I'll go to Maureen now because I can see that look of puzzlement and anxiousness on your face. Go ahead.
Let me just correct you. Notice that you're calling me Dr. Holder. Very pathetic indeed. Thank you. Anyhow, Wendy, I was invited here to talk about the internal election process of the Democratic Labour Party. An election process that is legitimate. I'm not going to dismiss it. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I can predict the strategy and what is likely to happen leading into the general election, should it be called next year at the end of this year. I want to focus on the internal election process right now, which is very legitimate. All right. Now, one has to be careful to manage oneself and one's campaign. If one so really a frenzy, except the one that the media creates for itself. Now, whatever you want to say about Mr. Hewitt's campaign, yes, we all agree. But the challenger, all right? And therefore, I believe that whatever happens come Sunday at the end of the conference will be the decision of the members of the Democratic League. So it'd be quite telling to me that the members decided we are going to go with new leadership should he win. Now, I will not dismiss Mr. Hewitt, even though I am confused as to his modus operandi and why he would want to challenge Mr. Pease at this time. I will not dismiss him because I recognize he has skills, he has talents that could very well turn out to be valuable to the Democratic Labour Party. So having said that, there's reconciliation, there is room for cooperation, there's work for them to continue to build the process of or continue to rebuild the Democratic Labour Party. Now, I thought that the Opera, the PISA, managed to manage the optics, so to speak, of her election bid by not commenting on anything he said. He says, her challenger says publicly. I thought that was well favor until Monday. But having made that little slip up on Monday, she came back on Thursday. We heard in the newscast how she spoke to oneness of the party, the unity of the party, the consolidation, the effort that it would need to take to come together and really present a challenge coming up in the next election, whenever it's going to be called. So that told me that she could rebound. That told me that that was a learning experience for this. Cannot sit here and pretend, say in one breath, that the internal election don't matter, but yet proceed to strategize over the potential of the party going into the next election. This is very important. This needs to happen. Yes, the leadership question could easily be resolved once members of the Democratic Labour Party win their seats and they form either the government or the opposition. They can get together because the Constitution says whoever commands the majority support should be the leader. So it may not be Verla de Pisa. It may be somebody else. But let us leave that for there. But let us look at what is happening or what is going to happen on Sunday. Now, the question for me is not so much the leadership challenge, but the impact of that challenge and what it will mean. Now, if Mr. Hewitt wins, you're talking about new policies, you're talking about in systems, you're talking about a bit of disruption and so on, because he can want to do things his way. But if Verla Pisa wins, that's continuity, that's progression, that is stability, because she's familiar with the systems, she's familiar with what she's put in place. So I would have, if I was advising Guy Hewitt, I would say sit this one out. Wait till after the elections are called, or wait till after this election cycle, because election is due, constitutionally due in 2023. Set out this election cycle, consolidate yourself within the party, allow people to understand who you are, and then you can challenge. So in that regard, I believe his timing is really off. I believe his strategy is really off. So I am hoping for and expecting that the members of the Democratic Labour Party, not the Barbados public, the members of the Democratic Labour, do the right thing. Think
Okay,
logically.
Maureen, we have to take a
Yes?
break here right now.
Sure.
And when we come back, we will actually look at some membership issues, especially reflecting back to the last presidential race that we had within the Democratic Labour Party. We'll be right back. Welcome back to CBC Presents the Special Extra. We're looking at the DLP's presidential race and election readiness. Before we went to break, we were speaking with Maureen Holder, and she was advising that she would sit this one out if she were Reverend Hewitt. Last presidential race, we saw Verla de Pisa against George Pilgrim, and it was a resounding victory for Mr. Pisa. In fact, we had the highest turnout at a DLP election for quite a while. Some 750 people or so voted. And from what I'm understanding from the internal machinery is that this number is expected to go even higher because they have been having individuals join the party with a rate of steadiness. What I would like to address here to Dr. George Bell is, if we're suggesting that this party is so fragmented, disjointed, why then are people looking to join?
I'm more thinking that the party was soundly defeated in the last general election, and therefore it would be expected recovery would have to rebuild and restructure. I don't know how much division there is in the right now, although the actual initiative of Reverend Hewitt suggests that there is a faction not too wise in relation to the leader, which is behind Mr. Hewitt, and is also telling him that the area to concentrate on now is not the restructuring, the challenging of the Barbados Party at the level of national politics, which is almost like an illusion. Where would you be coming from in terms of experience and political understanding to buy into such a strategy? So I think somebody is behind Mr. Hewitt in him, and back as he has to have some kind of support from somewhere. We know that there's some support, but it is, well, how grounded is that support in the realities of Barbados? Be some financially that he has pitched his campaign, that a continuation of recruitment of persons into the party, and this is reflecting then also on the success of Mr. Pisa again, and this is something that we work to succeed at. But if you're saying that people are still coming into the party, then you're doing something to draw them in at a time when they were soundly defeated. But remember this, that there are people out there, especially young people, who will be calculating that if it has de facto, because the seat of Mr. Adley is effectively a Barbados Labour Party seat to, then their future in the short term would have to be in the opposition party. We have even seen a particular person, a Labour Party activist, going over to the Democratic Labour Party because he doesn't see anywhere else. So that would explain some of the presence of young people, particularly ranks of the party at this time. They can project 5 that the more senior members of the Democratic Labour Party, other than those who are supporting Mr. Pisa, because she must have some support as well, and you know her uncle is Sir Philip Graves. So that I don't think, unless he's totally out of politics now, that he would not have advised her initially in relation to her future in politics. So you can expect that presence of young people. People are using Mr. Hewitt to say, give us another turn, and they themselves are in a submission to the recruitment of new members in the party, because they must have a future. They must be able to say, down the road, we are likely to get into Parliament, down likely to win again. And if you undermine that, then you're going to undermine that whole of recruitment, which is necessary in any political organization.
Right. Dr. Bell, we also had the reverse, where we had some young people who we thought were bright minds and good for the party, actually leaving and joining the Barbados Labour Party, and that was known. We had Simon Allen, we saw George, what's his surname now? George Connolly, and we also had Rodney Grant, people who would have left the party. When Mr. Pisa was questioned by us in the media about these defections and the fact that they were on the ballot for the previous election, her response was that they had not been around the party since the election, and therefore their defection was not really a loss for the party. But for me, if you've invested enough time, energy, and money in helping individuals to bring a campaign at the national level, right, you should at least try to contain them within the bowels of the party to be able to get their support, even if you're not running them back as candidates.
Though that there was a dynamic process that would have caused them to make that move. In other words, they were frustrated in relation to their immediate political ambitions. They did feel, and apparently they lost the possibility of that in the short term. This is of that some of them moved. You have to question the level of opportunism in their movement. If there was a frustration with the policies being practiced in the Democratic Party, the character of the leadership, well, then that's a different reason. But some of them could have moved also for raw, crass political opportunist reasons, that they just as some of the people that have gone the other way. In other words, there's some people that are calculating, my future 5 years down the road is with the Democratic Labour Party. And there are other people who have a more short-term view, who are saying, my future in the Democratic Labour Party, because of the choices of the leader, it tells me that I must go serve somewhere else, because I'll be active in politics at a level that would be recognizable. And, and they go over to the Barbados Labour Party.
All right. Peter, I want to...
So I would explain it in that.
Yes, in that way. Okay, understood. Peter, I want to bring you in here. Is what we're looking at now political opportunism, or are these individuals really looking to help the party rebuild and be ready for when the bell tolls?
Well, I mean, to start with, the concept of political opportunism is, one could say it's a bit crass, and I don't know if I want to be throwing those kind of labels around in relation to any of the individuals that are coming forward now. for all intents and purposes, all politicians or all persons involved in politics have to have some level of opportunism. They also have to have some level of strategy in terms of when they should get involved and when is best time and what is best for them in terms of where they need to get to go. That part is taken, and I think that that's a good point in which I should probably start to explore this whole question of why Guy Hewitt is getting involved at this time. And I think that, look, if you are coming into Barbados now and you want to lead a political party, I mean, there's really only one party that you would go towards, which is the Democratic Labour Party. The leadership of the Barbados Labour Party seems very solid. I think even getting a seat in the Barbados Labour Party is going to be challenging because of the number of MPs that are involved and the quantity of talent that they have around them. And then you look at the Democratic Labour Party, it's a party that has been through a lot. It's a party that doesn't have a seat in Parliament. And then it's a party that also has a leader that appears to be struggling. What Hewitt has done is he has seized a moment and a moment in time that will probably not repeat it again in a hurry, and says, you know, well, this is the time to come forward and see if I can stake my claim. If as Harley said, and I agree with him entirely, that the leadership of the DLP will be determined after the next election based on who wins the seat, I'm entirely comfortable with that. I am even comfortable with the idea that Verla de Pisa might not necessarily be one of them that wins the seat, because she has not gone in the place that she's most likely to emerge victorious. So if that's the conversation, it makes sense to say, well, let me not wait for that scramble. Let me see if I can take on the leadership at this stage. That way I can position myself in the best place to go and, you know, take advantage of the momentum. You can call it opportunism or you can call it realism. And I think that that has a lot to do with it. That I think that Hewitt has quite rightfully seized the time and determined that if he wants to lead a political party, this is the time to get in and this is the place to get in. I also think that we have to give him credit, you know, all fairness for a fairly slick campaign that has essentially raised the bar in terms of a challenge for the leadership of a political party in Barbados. I think that the strategy is odd, and I said that before. I also think that the whole idea of coming in this way, this national way, doesn't make a lot of sense in what is an internal party election. And, you know, we saw Jamaica, for example, recently. Lisa Hanna pitched, and I mean, she's not a Guy Hewitt because she has a seat in history and so on, but she pitched a national in very slick, using the same social media tactics and so on, at the leadership of the PMP, and lost. And a lot of the reasons is that the PMP election is an internal election within a party where you have to win branches and you have to win groups within the party and persuade people who are delegates to support you, which is very, very different from a national election, which is supported in different ways. So those are two things I wanted to throw into the mix. As far as people joining the DLP is concerned, I fully expect that people who are interested in politics now, like Reverend Hewitt, will also join the Democratic Labour Party because they feel that there may be opportunities for them down the road, and that is nothing unusual or surprising.
Okay, like for example, Mr. Hewitt issued today something called his 100 days of first 100 days of DLP presidency. Have you seen it as yet, Peter?
Yeah, I've seen it, and it's the same kind of national thing that, you know, 100 days in office. I mean, I don't know. I would defer to one of the others on that.
A lot of it is concentrated around digital media campaigning, the utilization of the media by doing, you know, weekly and monthly editorials. But some of that stuff we've already seen Verla doing. She has been using the youth arm within the party to try to create a greater presence on the various social media platforms. She has also been in the media constantly responding to each policy change, development. They've been on COVID every step of the way, etc. So isn't she doing enough?
Yeah, but the other point is that, sorry, I'll give it to Harley. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I wanted to make, it's interesting that you raised this point now, because the last time I checked, the Democratic Labour Party was headquartered in George Street, Belleville. For Mr. Hewitt to enter politics at the level he has entered at the top, And to date, he has had tremendous difficulty. I don't know if his GPS is not working in finding George Street. That is not lost on me. Um, you start first at the Hilton Hotel. You are participating in an internal party election with delegates from Hillaby and St. Andrew, and Cattle Wash, and Lamings and St. Joseph, and Ellerton and St. George. But you have started your campaign arriving in a limousine at the Hilton Hotel. And you follow that up few weeks later by arriving in your royal blue jacket at the Royal Yacht Club of Barbados. To my mind, there is something fundamentally wrong in a campaign that ought to be targeting working class people in a mass-based political party with the type of campaign that those who are around Guy Hewitt are advising him to pursue. Because
Hartley,
it makes absolutely no sense.
I want you to continue your point, but we have to take a quick break here. And when we come right back, we'll continue. And we're back with the special edition of the DLP's Presidential Race and Election Readiness, a CBC Presents program. I'm your host, Wendy Burke, and with me we have Hartley Henry, Dr. George Bell, Maureen Holder, and Peter Wickham. Hartley, before we went off, you were speaking to the images that Reverend Hewitt has been presenting in terms of how he has been controlling his narrative and where he has been seen. So what you're basically suggesting to us is that where he has started is not suggesting that he is a man of the masses. He has started at the top tier and not the middle or the bottom. Am I getting you correctly?
He clearly does not understand the market that he's seeking, that he's pursuing. And I say that because we are in the middle of COVID. You have Reverend Hewitt, who was up to recently, has been leading a church in the United States of America. I'm told church with a pretty large congregation, an active congregation, or what have you. I recall, and I just want you to bear with me for 2 minutes, and I'll give you an example of what I'm speaking about. I recall a few years ago, in the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Maria in Dominica. I was serving as a liaison at the time with Dominica and the outside world, and I received a call on my phone. And that call was from a Reverend Gary Edwards, a Barbadian, John Edwards, from Mylino Quarter in St. Peter. And he said to me, Hartley, I'm reading about the destruction in Dominica. Move to try to do whatever I can to assist the people of Dominica. How can I assist? What do you suggest I can do? Is there anything we can do? Gary Edwards is leading a small church in Melbourne, Florida, and he called to see what he could do to help the suffering people of Dominica. A few weeks later, The Prime Minister's office contacted me. They were trying to get a contact information for Reverend Edwards to send him a thank you for the 40-foot container of hurricane relief supplies that he was able to mobilize to get the people of Melbourne in Florida to assist in sending to the people of Dominica. Here you have in Barbados in the last 20 months or so, a situation where we have been brought to our knees by the COVID pandemic. Persons have lost their jobs. Persons have lost their source of livelihoods. There's been a lot of hardship. And there's still a lot of hardship in Barbados today. Don't let us fool ourselves. Added to that, we had the ashfall, which was another body blow to many Barbadians. Added to that, you had tropical storm Elsa, which was another body blow to ordinary Barbadians. There are thousands of Barbadians in Barbados tonight who are slipping beneath the cracks because of an accumulation of circumstances that have really impacted in a very adverse manner on Barbadians. I would have thought that Reverend Hewitt, as head of a large church in Florida, could have used an opportunity, if he had any serious interest in people, the same way that a fellow parish leader was able to assist persons in a sister island and was able to assist persons in St. Peter. I am yet to be told of a single Ribisco box
we
of
have
items.
We have to get you to wrap up now because
Yes,
we are
yeah, well,
winding down,
yeah.
and I have to let the other three give their parting comments. Yes.
Right. So I just want to take the point. I'm yet are said to connect to the average working Barbadian. It is okay to pitch your nice, sweet sounding campaign at the Yacht Club and at the Hilton Hotel. But so far, there are 11 parishes in Barbados. And so far, I've not seen anything to suggest to me that there is any genuine interest in the working people of Barbados. And that's the problem I have with that.
Okay, Dr. Bell, if we can go to you for your take on your final remarks.
Taking off from,
yes, you can pick up.
Yes, taking off from Mr. Henry's comments. I think that the people who are behind Mr. in a sense, just proceeding on a kind of marketing level of politics, they have observed the kind of style in Mr. Pisa, and it is one of the areas where some people would have been critical of a kind of spontaneous, basic, humble kind of person. From what I can say, I've met her only once, and when you meet her personally, there's something else that comes out. But when you see her in the media, she does not come across in a striking way. So to contrast leadership style of herself, I think that the people that are backing Mr. Hewitt decided to market him as this kind of star. And I think that they're misreading a lot of things. I've seen him trying Mr. Barrow's posture in his official photographs as probably the Mr. Barrow that people would know most of the time. The Mr. Barrow was not of that style. Now I think that Mr. Pisa does underplay herself, and she probably it would be good for somebody to advise her how to present herself more attractively in the media. But the contrasting style of Mr. Hewitt shows a terrible disconnect with the political culture of Barbados, and I think that the people that are dead, what a political leader of Barbados looks like.
All right, over to you now, Peter, and then we'll end with Maureen.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, I certainly when Verla de Pisa was elected as leader, I was one who congratulated her, and I thought that she was I think under the circumstances she was a reasonable choice. I mean, no one else ran against her initially. My sense is that at that time, Verla had three priorities. She needed to rub shoulders and meet the people. Of course, this is familiar language because the DLP did a lot of these things. She needed to meet the people and to get an understanding from people, to do like a listening tour, to understand what Barbadians wanted from her, what Barbadians wanted from the Democratic Labour Party. The second thing she needed to do was to outline a philosophy of the Democratic Labour Party. I think the DLP needs to reorient, it needs to reflect, and it needs to rebuild. So in the same way that the Barbados Labour Party brought a document that said, what is the philosophy and the current position and grounding of the Barbados Labour Party, I think that the Democratic Labour Party needs to go through a process like that. The third thing she needed to do was to focus on the institution, rebuilding it both physically, because George Street, of course, was falling apart. She has to rebuild it physically, and also to start to rebuild the institution and help the institution to work in terms of candidate selection and to get all of those things going.
Okay.
Sadly, she has not really approached those issues in the way that she should approach, and I think that that is a big part of the reason that she's vulnerable. I just want to say one quick thing, that I appreciate that the slickness of Hewitt's campaign is impressive, but remember, he does not have the burden of having to do any of these things that were outlined. So he's able to just say, well, let me just go for the gloss.
So he's riding in on his chariot without the hard work.
Precisely, the hard work that she has to do in terms of building up George Street and raising funds and doing that type of thing.
Okay.
So that
Need
is
to get to Maureen now. Thank you.
Wendy, let me come back to the central point of the discussion. Political parties go through tensions and then they settle down. This happened within the Barbados Labour Party until they settled the leadership question. And the Barbados Labour Party ran a very presidential style campaign on the personality of the leader who is now the Prime Minister. While I have concerns about Guy Hewitt's campaign, I'm not going to waste time attacking him in terms of what he has done, because he will either pay or he will either be rewarded come this Sunday. But I'll tell you this, it speaks to a general trend of implementing presidential style tactics in prime ministerial elections, something of which I have a concern, because I believe the two don't gel. So this is why there's a confusion over what Mr. Guy Hewitt is doing in terms of it almost looks like he's in a presidential election or in a general election. But I would not waste time attacking him at this moment, because he's already done it. What I will say, come Sunday, the members of the Democratic Labour Party will decide on a leader.
Okay, I want to thank my four panelists, Mr. Hartley Henry, a well-known Caribbean political strategist, also George Bell. I wish to thank Peter Wickham, and you, of course, Maureen. And as she said, and rightly so, the people will decide at George Street. So let's keep an eye on this race. Let's keep an eye on this election. Let's see who becomes victorious for the DLP. The DLP's presidential race and election readiness. We've brought to you a special edition of CBC Presents. We thank you for viewing, and good night. I'm Wendy Burke.